Welcome to Class 9 of Jay Levin's Life Mastery Basics course. This class is the first of 3 on skills for mastering communications with others so that all your relationships, exchanges, and your life itself progress as you would prefer.
So it's nice to see you again. This is class number 9, and it's the beginning of the 3 classes we're going to do on nonviolent communications, just basically on human communications. And as with emotional mastery, inner mind mastery, these are simply trainings we absorb or not absorb in the culture pretty peripatetically, meaning pretty unevenly. So I hardly know a human being who's such a master at human communications. I know a few, I'm not one of them, but such a master at human communications that they can take almost any situation and turn it around. But the core teaching that will come up, particularly in class 10 and 11, involves one of those people, Marshall Rosenberg, who wrote the book Nonviolent Communication, which I've recommended to everybody. Please try to read it before you turn on the DVD. It's helpful. And the power of the book is in its simplicity and its freshness, and because it deals with a lot of different levels of what comprises basic good human communications, which means basic good relating skills. And most of us are disabled in our human relating skills, not because we're bad people or not because we're stupid people, but because we're untrained people. And we're trained in a matrix of defend, attack, conceal, take care of myself first, and then everything else will follow. And those are not the good rules to follow in human communications. And the kinds of training we've been talking about, in fact, the whole course is something that should be taught in the schools from day one, and parents should have optional chances to go and learn much of what's being taught here and a great deal more. And in fact, those courses exist. There are good people and good companies that have broken down these trainings so they can develop far more emotionally aware, easily educatable, easily relatable to children, human beings, just a more evolved human being. We've got the tools for, and only a handful of school districts in America actually use it. And somebody ought to take up an international crusade to get these tools adopted in every schoolhouse in the world. Because the end product of that is we'll have stronger economies, better lifestyles, better relatingness, and we can abolish war. Because war is just a product of the old matrix. It's not a product of being able to work through the issues that you have out of a sensibility that we're not just out for me alone or our little group alone, and we'll exploit you or take advantage of you, etc. So, okay, that said, let's begin with what we call the basics of all communications. So human communications, if you really break it down, exists of 3 elements, 2 of which are almost always present, all right? One element is data. This is a studio, right? You're wearing a red pullover blouse, right? You have dark brown hair. That's a camera I'm looking into. Pure data, right? Today is a Tuesday. Pure data. So data is one of the things we communicate. The second thing we communicate is judgment. You have very pretty brown hair. I like your red pullover, right? That's a cool camera. It's Tuesday. I don't like Tuesdays generally. Whatever it is. So we've got data and we've got judgment. And the third thing we're communicating is attitude. There's a vibrational frequency by which we create attitude, right? I really like your brown hair, right? Oh man, that's a really cool red dress. So when we're talking to each other, the misunderstandings that come forward are usually built around judgment, right? And often judgment-wedded attitude. And we don't learn to separate them out. We hear somebody's judgment, we set the judgment, and we're dealing with the judgment. And we pronounce our own judgments as if they're written on tablets by God. More often than not, we pronounce our judgments or opinions. So one of the basics of good human communications is to understand that a judgment is just a judgment. It's a perception in the moment. 5 seconds later, you could have a completely different judgment because you've picked up a different bit of data, Or you could have a different judgment because you've had a moment to reflect and thought, well, maybe that's not correct because I remember this and this situation, so maybe I was being a little unfair there in that judgment. So one of the cores of good human communication is the sense of ownership of judgment as just judgment. And the communication to the other person that you accept that your opinion in the moment is your opinion in the moment. This is my judgment in the moment, right? So how do we get into trouble around data and judgment and attitude? We often mix them up. So lots of couples will fight over, he said this, no, I never said that, right? I never said that. They're having a data fight. Did I even say this, right? Data fights are the most difficult in the world to deal with. The Republicans and Democrats are always having data fights, right? A typical data fight might also go something like this. She's waiting for him and he shows up a half hour late in her mind. And she says, I'm supposed to be here at 5 o'clock, it's 5:30, and this is just like you. This is what you do all the time. You're so absorbed in your own stuff, you're completely insensitive to me. It's just another example of it, right? So we've got data, he was supposed to be here at 5, and he's got judgment, right? So what are the options there? One of the options could be that the data's wrong, and he says, no, that's just not true. Here, I showed you, I wrote it down in my book. We were supposed to meet here at 5:30. Look what I wrote down. So we just had a misunderstanding or a mismemory, but I wasn't trying to be late, and so I just can't accept your judgment on me. A second response might be, you're right, I meant to be here 5:30, but I couldn't call you. I left my cell phone at home. You can search me. I don't even have it. I got caught up in this terrible traffic jam. You can check on the news. Fifth Street is all blocked up. We had they circuit us around the other way, et cetera, et cetera. So your data is right, but your judgment on me, this being an example of me, is not correct. You're separating out the two. A third response might be, oh, you're always picking on me. You're always finding fault with me. That's his data. You're always finding fault with me. And I can't stand it anymore. I think there's something wrong with you that you're always finding fault with me. That's his judgment. Another potential response might be, you're right, I'm late. And when I think about it and look at it, I did put you in second place, so this other thing happened. I wasn't sensitive, and that's just the way I am. This is my priorities. I can't promise you I'll be any different. This is what happens. My work comes first, etc. Okay? Not uncommon in marriage counseling if you've ever experienced it. Okay? Another response might be, yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. I was insensitive. I have been paying too much attention here. I don't want you to feel this way, and I accept that I have been this way for a while, and I promise you, I'm going to change my behavior. I don't want this to be an issue between us, and just watch me from now going forward. Right? So that's a pretty interesting and complex range of results, right? Okay. So what works best in human communications? Honesty, integrity, respecting the other person, owning your own judgments as just judgments, not buying into the other person's judgments as more than judgments, so you don't attack back, you don't go into an attack mode, right? So in an ideal situation, when somebody says something to you, you examine the data in it first, right? You say, yeah, I agree, we agree on the data. And then you look at their judgment that's been laid on you. So what's a judgment that's been laid on you? In this case, you're insensitive. You're self-absorbed, you're selfish. And if you're in integrity in your communications and you don't want to be operating in the reactive matrix where you're in the victim and perpetrator, oh, you're making me a victim, I'm a perpetrator, I'm going to defend myself and attack you back, frequent attack back. Well, what about when you did this? And you're not so perfect and you make these mistakes. Very frequent, very common. So that's the breakdown of human communications. That's a breakdown of relatingness. The building of relatingness is to be able to say to yourself, I am going for absolute integrity and the courage to speak truthfully about myself and to really look cleanly at myself. That's a core of good human relation, of communications in relatingness, in relationship and relatingness. So if somebody says, you're insensitive, if you really, really want to be in a different paradigm and operate from a different place and find out the power of that and the magic of that, you will look at that very carefully and say, was I insensitive? Was I distracted? Could this person have easily seen me as disrespectful to them and not being mindful of them? And if the answer is yes, own it. Don't try to avoid it. Try to find out if the answer is yes. And if the answer is yes, then the thing is to say, I own that. I own your judgment. I agree with you that I'm showing insensitivity. I've been insensitive. And then you can say, here's my intention going forward. And if your intention is to make a change, or if your intention is to say, I can't make a change, this is who I am, I'll accept the consequences of that. I'm just too obsessed with my work. I'm not going to be able to change. And I'll accept the consequences. So if you're going to leave me or not be my friend anymore, I'm sorry, but I can't promise. I'm not in a place where I can, with integrity, promise that I'm going to be able to change this behavior pattern and be more sensitive to you. Or you can say, yes, I'm going to change this behavior pattern. I am going to be more sensitive to you, and make it an agreement, as we spoke about in the relationship classes, which are relatingness classes. I keep my agreements. I'm going to make this agreement, and if at some point I can't keep this agreement, I'm going to inform you in advance, and we'll try to negotiate another spoken contract rather than unspoken contract, right? So those are the basic rules of decent human communications. And data, judgment, ownership, and willingness to be ruthlessly honest with yourself and clear about where you want to go, not operating from fear, but operating from the courage that truthfulness is the bridge you need to your true self. And honesty doesn't mean you're going to heal all your trauma in any one moment. It means it's a phenomenal path in human communications to the beauty of healthy relationships.
Coming up in the next segment, Jay teaches about the nature of judgmentality and how we use it to make sure our lives don't work as best as we like, and what the thinking and skills are to create a different and more powerful way of relating and communicating.
So in the next step, you can get challenged by people's judgments and find that as you practice this, as you practice the integrity, you have the room to say to the person, I don't agree with your judgment, and be believed, right? If I take responsibility and clearly look to be honest on all the issues where somebody's got a judgment on me, and I can see how they got that judgment, I can see my behavior that led up to that judgment, and I own it, then when it comes up that I disagree, people are going to believe me. People are going to say, okay, I get it. So if you've made an accusation about me, I had a fellow make an accusation about me once in a context where I was known for being straightforward, but he made an accusation involving a nonprofit organization that I had some dealings with, and he accused me of distracting the organization by doing this and that. And in fact, I had done just the opposite. So the data wasn't even correct. And I knew he was coming from someplace because he was jealous over a certain situation that had not worked out for him in this organization. And so when I said to him and to the other people, no, that's not correct. You have to look at this. This is your stuff, not my stuff. I'm in integrity here. This is the data about what I did and how I handled this, and I'm not buying your judgment. And so I suggest you take a look at where your judgment is coming from and what you're projecting on me that's not accurate. And nobody else had a problem with that, because in other dealings I would own where I was amiss or awry or not sensitive or whatever the issue was that somebody might have had a judgment about. So you build credibility by practicing authenticity, by practicing the ability to look at yourself in an honest way, not defend yourself, not fear that you're going to get hurt, not fear the outcome, but walk across the hot coals of that little bit of anxiety or that old pattern and really be truthful. And, basically all healing requires walking across hot coals. You're going to be afraid to do this. You're going to want to break this pattern. What are the consequences? Your trauma self is going to say, we're comfortable. We may not like where we are, but it's familiar. It's comfortable. I don't want to take a risk here on anything. Your authentic self will say, unless you get to the other side of this, whether it's changing the jobs, dealing with this person in a different kind of way who you've been codependent with or hiding out from or trying to control, whatever it is where you have to look at yourself and do a different behavior pattern that opens up fear with you, there's nothing like walking across those hot coals. And the rewards of that is yourself. Every hot coal you walk across successfully brings you closer to yourself and makes it easier to walk across the next hot coal. So the hot coal is saying, being really in integrity about yourself when people have these judgments, gives you authority to be able to say, I am in integrity here and be believed, and to discover that you've got options. When you own something, then you're going to have an easy window on your own behavior pattern to be able to consider whether you want to go to this place or not go to this place, right? So as an exercise now, what I'd like everyone to do in the classroom and at home is think of a recent drama you experienced with someone. Write down how you handled it. Write down what the data was. Write down what the judgments were coming from the other person, what the judgments were coming from you, and how you evaluated the other person's judgments, whether you had data issues, judgment issues. Just do this as an exercise to examine the scenario so you can be an observer of that scenario. Was there reason to own the other person's judgment? Was there not reason? Was the person projecting on you? Were they being accurate? Is there a behavior pattern you'd want to change? Write this down, and we're going to come back to this at the end of this class and revisit it with some of the things we're going to learn between now and the end of the class. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about judgments and empowered languaging. When you're making a judgment, as I said earlier, it's only a statement of opinion in the moment. One of the traditions I've been trained in is actually use the word judgment instead of opinion. It's like you would say, my judgment on this is this. My judgment on this is this. And if it becomes familiar on it, you say, you know, I have this judgment on this. It's a softer way of saying it, right? I have a judgment on this. I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's wrong, but this is my sense of it at the moment. And correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a different perception, different data that might alter my position, right? That's the attitude and vocabulary that opens another person up so that they can communicate with you, not from a place of pushing you away, reactive defense. Oh, you're an asshole. You make, you know, how can you say that about me, right? Well, you don't get nothing right. Whatever the other person might say. Owning that you have an opinion, as this is my opinion at the moment, with that clarity and softness that suggests, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. When we're fully awake, one of the things that happens when people are fully awake, the few of us who ever get there, and again, I'm not there, is that the talking mind goes away and judgmentality goes away. And it gets replaced by assessment. So you never have an attitude about something, you're just assessing something. You might say, you know, this person has these characteristics. They have a part of them that hasn't been healed, so they behave this way or that way. They've got this fear-based behavior. They're still scared, so they're more likely to do this or that. That's not a judgment, that's an evaluation. And it's very important to distinguish between judgments and evaluations. And also, therefore, it's important to include it in your languaging. So if you're talking about something where you're evaluating something and you're doing it without a hint of judgment in it, then use the word evaluation. My evaluation of this is, I think this happened and this might be coming from here and here. I could even be wrong in my evaluation, but that's my evaluation of this situation and this person's condition or this set of circumstances. Underneath every judgment is the idea that the other person is a mess, screwed up, doesn't get it, ought to be punished, knocked out of good society, whatever it is. There's an attitudinal attack on the other person. And why do we have that attack? Because, remember, when we created our idealized selves, When we said the world's got to slow us, we were doing it in matrix that says, I've got to be better than. I've got to have my little edge up on that person. And that's where judgmentality comes from. All judgmentality is, I know better than you. I'm going to feel a little bit better by being able to put you down a little bit. My judgment makes me feel a little bit better. Every time you do that, every time you judge yourself and say, I want to feel a little bit better, you are so weakening yourself. You are so taking yourself away from your true self. You are not making yourself stronger. You are not making yourself better. You are actually setting yourself up for some fall, some sort of future thing, because you're not coming from your true self. You're not coming from a place of being in a circle with other beings, right? And in a manner of being in that circle where evaluation and shared data and shared looking for the common truth past the judgments and even past the evaluations, because my evaluation might be influenced by your evaluation. You provide a different piece of information or a different perspective. All of that healthy potential communication is undermined by judgment. All human relations are undermined by judgment. Every human relations that collectively builds up to some group exploiting another group. If you like being exploited by Wall Street, that's where it comes from, guys. They want to be bigger and better than you. You know, these people are so inferior, we can turn them into slaves, right? Or these people are so inferior, let's nuke them. Without knowing the people making judgments from certain small bases of behavior characteristics and from fear and defensiveness. So to get out of the habit of dropping your small nukes, tiny little nukes, on other people, communications is essential. Good communications where you recognize and own your judgments, try to move from judgment to evaluation, but clearly own your judgments is very important.
Coming up next, Jay teaches the differences between power language and weak language and describes the profound negative effects weak language has in the world and in our lives, including to our health.
So I want to talk a minute about the power of languaging and the different languaging that's used for judgments and for power languaging versus weak language. Language is phenomenally powerful. I'm Jewish. I come from a tradition where, in the Kabbalistic, the metaphysical aspects of Judaism, the very letters of the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, are thought to be design structures of the universe. They're like sacred geometric structures. So they not only hold a meaning, they hold an actual imprinting of the way the universe relates to itself. Elements of the universe relate to themselves. Language is considered that powerful. And we know from some recent scientific experiments done by Dr. Mamoto in Japan and some others, that in fact languaging is so powerful that words will influence the shape of molecules when looked at through an electronic microscope, highly blown up molecules. So if you write the word love and paste it on a slide of water and put it under a microscope, you get this beautiful design molecule of water, and that's what this represents. And if you write the word hate on it, he found, then you get this decrepit, ugly-looking form of molecule. And he played around with a lot of different words. Someone gave me as a gift once a blown-up photo of the slide in which love and gratitude. And it's one of the most beautiful structures you can imagine. And love and gratitude was written on that slide. So languaging has power. When we say negative thoughts to ourselves and beat ourselves up, and again, there's good research supporting this, we undermine our cell structure. We can give ourselves cancer with enough negative thoughts. We can give ourselves other diseases. And when we say positive things and use positive languaging and powered languaging, we get a different response within our body chemistry. Because every word has a vibrational structure and its meaning has a vibrational structure. And we learned from the biofeedback materials we discussed in the class about heart math and mentioned a few other classes. We've learned that we can measure the frequency of every emotion, of every statement with biofeedback. And you're going to get a different frequency. You get a different energy, literally, that can be managed. And it's universal. If I'm angry and you're angry, depending on the degree of anger, we're going to be in the same parameters of frequency on the biofeedback machine. And when you take those frequencies and you put them against live cells and you bombard a live cell with a frequency, that live cell is going to have a certain kind of response to it. And it's going to have a different kind of live response to the sense of loving. You know, so how did the great healers heal? Well, all the great healers are coming from a place of love. You know, if you're Christian, how did Christ heal? He healed from love. He brought an intense energy of intense frequency of love. And divine love, something even more powerful than even human love in the Christian cosmology. And there are healers, people who do healing. And I've had plenty of experience with them and around them, and I find it indisputable. And there's plenty of lab research about it. And what they're doing is they're delivering a different energetic field to the body. Your languaging and your words and your attitudes and your thoughts, third element, the third component of communication, attitudes and thoughts, delivers a profound message to yourself. When you're angry at yourself and saying bad shit about yourself, you're hurting yourself physically, right? When you're attacking another person from that same place, you are literally attacking them physically. And that's actually your intention. You don't know it, but that's your intention. You'd like to be attacking them physically if you're holding back. But you really want to damage them, right? You really want to damage the other person rather than relate to them, because you're stuck in the matrix of being upset and angry because you're not in your true self. You got damaged as a kid and you're in one of your reactive patterns. So languaging and communications are an essential way into good mental health yourself, good human relationships, good community, etc. So having said that, now we're going to look at a range of language that was taught in another tradition some years ago and somewhat modified. And what I'd like everybody to do as we play this game together is take a page of paper, a fresh page of paper, draw a line down the middle, a vertical line down the middle. So you have two sides. As your headings, put on one side empowered/responsible, and then the other side put victim. So it's empowered, responsible language, and victim language, okay? So we're going to play a game in here with the studio audience, and you can have the guessing game at home. And I'm going to ask, as we go through this, what you think is empowered languaging and what's victim languaging, okay? All right, so here's our first example. You know, whenever you go to the ball game, it's really crummy when you have to sit in the upper deck and can't see part of the field. You know, whenever I go to the ball game and I find myself in the upper deck, I get really upset because I can't see the full field. So which is empowered languaging and which is victim language?
The first was victim.
First is victim, you. Okay, good. So you is yes. So think about how many times you disassociate from yourself and say you when you mean I. When you meet a guy, you know what happens. You want to take some time with him and he's always pushy. You know, my boss, you just can't talk to him. So this is very common. And the truth is, every time you say something like this, you're taking yourself out of the power you have to own who you are in the world, to own that I am making a statement. This is my reality and judgment at the moment. It may be wrong. This is my data at the moment. This is my understanding. I'm running away from showing up by saying you. I'm not showing up. I'm in avoidance. I'm a flighter. And it's very common. I mean, it's remarkably common because the matrix is in all of us. The victim perpetrator matrix is in all of us. But when you say, I find it hard to talk to my boss, I'm upset when guys just won't give me time to get to know them. I don't like the upper decks at this particular stadium, etc. Whatever you're saying, you've gone into empowered language. Next, tell me if this is empowered or not empowered. I can't go to the movies with you tonight. I have to work. You know, I have to get this task done. Is that empowered language or weak language? Okay. So I can't go to the movies with you tonight, because I'm choosing to stay home and get this work done. Otherwise, the consequences would be I'll likely get fired. So my choice is I'm staying home. Empowered, right. Okay. So most of us evade responsibility, and this is a big one, because we're afraid to show up and claim that it's our choice and our decision, lest we be criticized, found fault with, etc. Because in the matrix we grew up in, and the matrix of the culture, we're all trying to duck and avoid being found fault in this judgmental culture. So when you're empowering yourself, you're saying, you're recognizing the only real power you have in life is the power of decision. And until you understand that, it's harder for you to understand the choices being put forward by your own traumatized self versus your real self. When you're ducking, you're running on the machine. When you're not ducking, you're opening yourself to the potential that your knowing self will say, no, we're going to do this instead of that. So I choose to is a very important, strong statement. I choose to stay home tonight. I'm choosing to stay home because I've got to do this. I'm choosing not to go out with you tonight. I'm choosing to go to this place rather than this place. Okay? Good. Next is easy one. I can't or I choose not to. I'm choosing not to do that. Same as I choose to, I choose not to. We're going to make I statements, not you statements. To say I choose to or I choose not to.
Jay continues to explore other examples of weak and strong language, including the use of the word should, as in you should or I should.
So along the same lines, which is weak and which is strong? I could, I should. I could is strong, right. I should is weak. And most of the time we say I should. And shoulds have a particular power in the culture. Should says you know best for yourself and you know best for everybody else. So it's one of those words, and its proper use of the conjunction sense rather than the command sense, like you should do this or I should do that, then you are imposing your sense of reality. And it's always your traumatized sense of reality, because people who are coming from the high self, the knowing self, don't use the word should. You're imposing a traumatized sense of power over. You know better, your judgment is better, you should do this. You don't know that anybody should do anything. You don't know that they don't need to have that failure in order to reclaim their true spirits. Maybe that's the last failure they need to have to awaken, right? So should means you're playing God. And most of us play God first with ourselves. We play this negative God with ourselves, this negative internalized critic. Should is a word allied to the internal critic, as well as the external critic. So what are some ways to deal with people? One of the basics is to say to people, are you open to some suggestions, or, not throw advice at people, not hit them over the head with you know better than them, but just say, if you're open to some other ideas, you want me to give you some other ideas, and problem solvers you might want to think about and evaluate, just let me know, right? Rather than you should do this, and my advice to you is, it's another, right? So if people want your counsel, if they want to have your opinion, and they want this, just say, I'm here for you. At any time you think you might need somebody to bounce an idea off of, or you're struggling with something, and I don't know if I'm completely right about anything. I have my judgments, my opinions. I've had some experience around this area. So, if I can share something with you that you might or might not find helpful, I'm happy to do so. So that's the power of staying out of should consciously, because when you stay out of should, then you're going to say, well, what do I do differently if I'm not going to say should? If I'm not going to say, here's my advice, what do I do differently? So that opens you to really being some creativity in your thinking. Any questions so far?
I had a question. I had a recent incident with a friend, and he's like me. We've both done a lot of this sort of work, and it was stated, he said, "You're frustrated." And it went into this whole thing because to me it felt like a passive-aggressive thing to state someone else's emotional state instead of asking, "Are you frustrated?" to state you're frustrated, and that's like a should to me, or like stating that you know better, you know my emotional state better than myself. And so I wondered about that, and also how when two people have done a lot of work, you end up in like a psychology session, or you're songing back and forth, and you end up in sort of a circular communication because you've both done this work. And so where do you break out of that?
So him saying you're frustrated is a power move, right? It's a very subtle power move he's probably unconscious of. He's making a judgment, right? And he's saying, he's giving himself a little bit of one-upmanship because he sees you and he can tell you who you are. And we all do that day in, day out, too frequently, until we decide to heal it. So you're right. The idea that he would state this, you're going to find offensive, it's going to put you on the defense. It's not going to open you up, it's going to shut you down. It's not good communication. Good communication opens the other person up. So what might he have said? I sense you feeling some frustration around this issue, around this matter. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that true? Because I sympathize with you about that frustration you're feeling, rather than you're frustrated. I'm sure everybody listening and watching gets the difference. So on the second part of the question, one of the things that, if I understand the second part of the question correctly, when you're first learning material, it's not integrated into your beingness. You tend to use the words very formalistically. You're not comfortable yet with them. So you use them formalistically, and the other person will then try to respond from the best of their memory formalistically. And it feels like unreal because it's not coming from this smoothly authentic place where you've integrated it. Use the different languaging to say the same thing. So I can say, if I'm more smooth, I can say, "Oh, I sense you're frustrated," and I'm still in that old power languaging, because that's my attitude. That's the third element. I'm bringing that tone versus, I sense you're frustrated about this, right? So this attitude tends to be still more aggressive behind even the same languaging, right? When you're first practicing this, because you haven't really settled into the mindset of what it means and integrated. What it really means is you're really holding a space of honoring the other person at a really deep level and not holding so rigidly onto every thought you have that needs to be validated, because if it's not validated, you don't exist. You're not good enough. You're getting it wrong. So you're searching for that validation rather than easy communication in the sense of, we live in a very, very, very complicated reality, right? We have so overcomplicated existence because we're all crazy from the being in this traumatized self on a sliding scale and being this hierarchical world on a sliding scale and not being in that circle of expressing our knowingness as equals and sharing, common wisdom, group wisdoms. We're just not there on the mass level. We're there in certain circumstances, certain circles. The culture is getting healthier and healthier, fortunately. We're learning a lot of stuff. But it's complicated. We're in a very, very complicated world. And so the process of getting from where you are now to the place we want to be means you're going to make mistakes and have awkward moments and feel uncertain and, run over each other as you practice this. But the commitment is to keep the practice going, right? Just keep working it. Don't give up. And relax into it in such a way that you can say, how can I say this in my own words and be heard by the other person in a way that they don't find offensive and won't put them on the defense.
Jay next teaches about power language and enabling others while answering student questions.
So my question is, I was recently in a drama situation. I was in a massage class, and we work with partners, and we have to give feedback. And I didn't say, "May I give you feedback?" because it's normal that's customary as we're learning. So I said, "I think that when you get to the ball of the foot, you use finger circle." And she just did not take my feedback. And so I had to say it again, and then she argued with me. And then I had to call the teacher to clarify because I wanted her to be clear on what she's doing. but she was just so close to my feedback that I closed up. She attacked me and said, "What's so funny?"
So, gay, here we are in the Matrix. What do you know? People get defensive in the Matrix. If anything even sounds like a little criticism, a lot of people just, oh my God, here's mommy, daddy after me again, or somebody after me again, right? That whole machine takes over, and the people don't want to hear. So that's what happened. So if you want to be very anticipatory that most people are going to be there, and I mean, this is a situation where you would think you have a contract, an understood contract that you can give this kind of feedback, but it was never made spoken. It was never said in the class, I gather, that, okay, be sure to be able to point out the other person and everybody be able to hear it. So the teacher actually should have created a zone for that to happen by making a spoken contract with the students. If that happens, it's like sort of like when you're dealing with anybody where you want to point out something, where the basics is to say, you do great stuff here, here, and here, and I just want to point out something where you might pay attention, where I think that you could get a little better at, or something like that. Or you could polish up your skills around. Or even if that sounds too harsh, just say, you know, I want to point out something, period. It's the best way to deal with employees, best way to deal with situations, always honoring the other person, what you like first. So you might have said, I really think this massage is going great. And the teacher said, that reminded us, just remind you that the teacher said that we should do this in this way on the foot. So she would have heard it within the context initially of, you like her work, and you've punted authority from, I know you're not doing it right, to, you know, what the teacher said this, and we should do this in this area. But that kind of mindfulness is work, you know, and frankly, if you want to practice this stuff, you can basically say, I have every day, I've got this whole universe of people who are screwed up, just like I've been screwed up by this whole cultural matrix, and I'm going to go out there and practice and enjoy myself practicing how to do it differently and see what different results I get, just as a game. My fun game of fabulous communications. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my next question is, while this was happening, when I understood that I cannot, what I was doing, I could not give her feedback that she would be able to absorb, I did a shutdown. And I was being, I guess, reactive and defensive to whatever she was doing by not receiving my comment. And so my brain concluded, okay, there's no point in telling her anything, so I just did a shutdown. But I became angry. Do you have any suggestion to how to move out of that as quickly as possible so I don't get stuck there?
Well, when you get more versed in heart math or soma breathing, by practice, you'll be able to move out of that feeling more quickly. And it would be helpful to you to remind yourself that if you have a judgment, to try to express it as a preference or an opinion. So it has some weight off it. So you can say, you know, my preference would be, you know, that you might do this. That's an easy way. My preference would be you might handle it this way. And if it's going to be a judgment, it might be more along the lines of, I could be wrong, but my sense of it is that this might work better if it was done this way. So you put it in how to improve it rather than how to find fault. The other consideration when you go into reactiveness is to understand that your reactiveness and her reactiveness are always triggering each other. And that's what you want to come out of. That's the work. Owning your own reactiveness and coming out of it and being responsible for healing it is the profound work of healing your trauma. And as you learn to do that, you'll find the space to be able to handle these things better inside yourself. And the final piece of this is that once we finish the 3 classes on communications, and when you review the relationship classes and the communication classes and really start practicing that work, part of the reason we go into reactiveness is because we go into this triggering pattern. And we go into the triggering pattern because we don't feel we have the tools, and we don't have the tools, to handle a situation differently so it's got a different kind of outcome. So the more you learn the tools, the more you master the tools, and the easier it becomes for you over practice, the less likely you're going to go into tension anyway, because you're less likely to trigger the person. And if you do, you're going to have a feeling that, I know how to handle a triggered person. I can handle a triggered person, whereas I couldn't before, because I've now practiced these rules and they work. Nonviolent communication works. Once you internalize, integrate, it works, and it works pretty easily. So cool. Okay, moving on. Tell me which is power language and which is not. This is going to be a slam dunk for everybody. You are just one of those people who can't be trusted. You know, I have an opinion of you, a judgment about you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've experienced so far, I don't think you're very trustworthy. Right? Now, most of us will have terror in our bellies for saying the second part, but that's real power language. That's where you say, I'm going to take responsibility for where I am, and I'm not going to model collar you, handle you, codepend with you. I'm just going to speak a truth at the moment that I think is true, that your behavior is not very trustworthy. I may be mistaken, but my sense of you so far is that I'm not trusting you. I'm getting a sense that you're not very trustworthy. And I'm open to what you might want to say about that versus you're not trustworthy. So it's a very strong statement, but it's leaving the place of opinion. You're not cool. You're a foolish person. You're this, that kind of person. You're that kind of person. It's disempowering rather than to say, essentially what you're saying is I'm drawing a conclusion about you from your behavior. And my early conclusion is that you don't step up and keep your word and stand up for what you speak for, and I'm therefore finding it hard to trust you. Just another way of saying it. So, but you're saying, I'll claim responsibility for this, and I'm happy to hear what you say, but this is my sense of you.
In this next segment, Jay continues to examine power versus weak language, including the use of the phrase, I will try versus I will.
Okay, that's a good lead-in for the next one. I'm sorry. I'll try to do something better. I'm sad. I will do something about it.
First one's weak.
First one's weak, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's deal with, there's two elements here. The element is sorry and the element is sad, and I try and I will. They can always be two separate items. Okay. When you're apologizing to somebody, you're apologizing. You're saying, I'm sorry. I take responsibility for that. I'm sorry. I was mistaken. I apologize. When somebody says, my dog just died, and you say, I'm sorry, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's more powerful to say, oh, I feel for you. I feel that for you. I sense your sadness. I feel that sadness. I feel how disappointing, etc. It's that I'm sorry becomes just a sort of shorthand for an almost dismissive place about it. I'm sorry. We all say it so quickly, so fast, rather than beginning to understand and relate to somebody from a feeling you may have and identify their feelings. And as we'll get into very carefully again in the next class in nonviolent communication, this stuff about feelings is so incredibly important in human communications. So every opportunity you have to express a feeling about something rather than an idea is a valuable way of opening connection with another human being. So the next piece of that is I will, I'll try to. Just like you say should, the joke is should be dropped from your vocabulary. That's the joke on should. I recommend that should be dropped from your vocabulary. And I also recommend that I'll try to be dropped from your vocabulary. You're either going to do something or you're not going to do it. If you say, I'm going to try to start a new business, you're going to fail. I'm going to start a new business. You're aligning your power of your intentionality and your focus around something, right? You are a power force in the universe. You can move mountains of challenges out of the way with your intentionality, your focus, and your clearly thought out step-by-step actions, right? Opening the doors for the universe to meet you and then cleaning up your blocks to receiving, et cetera, the work we've been doing in the other classes. When you say, I'll try to, you're just trying. It's not going to happen. What does that mean? I'll try to quit smoking. Good luck. You know, I'll try to raise money for this project. You're not going to raise any money for the project. 5 cents when you need $5, you know? But when you commit to something and you say, I will do something, you're putting the force of who you are behind it. It's like making I statements. I am, I choose, I could, not I can't, I'm sad, and I will. I will. I will do this. Or I won't do this. I choose not to do this. I won't do this. I don't want to do this, so I'm not going to do it.
So my question is, I've had this thing since my 20s about should, try, and I can't, and all the negative things that come out, where the implication is someone's half-baked in my assessment of the situation when they say, I'll try, or, you know, I'll think about it, or it's a waffling type of thing. And so when triggers come up and I hear people say those things, I have to take it back in, calm myself, center myself. Luckily I have my little portable heart math thing, and I put it on my finger, and I test myself if I'm in the car, or, you know, go in a room and take my little thing, and I stay away from the situation. I do the pattern interrupt. Yet I still realize that my yeses mean more, my affirmations mean more than any negative. So when I come back into conversation with someone who has said, I don't know, I should have done that, I'll try, I'll do better next time, I do my best not to have a judgment on that. And so how do I deal with that especially on a work basis, where someone is promising to do something for me and they just crap out?
So, great question. Wonderful question. You must have had a controlling parent.
My mother.
Yes. That's where you got that. That's where you got your reactivity to it. And nice that you're catching it in yourself and working, and, you know, instructive that, in fact, the machine is still there. You know, you go home to your parents and...
That's why I bought the
Yeah.
heart math, to make
Good.
sure that I can put it on my finger, put it on my ear, and just test myself.
Right. Okay. So you haven't, maybe need to do a little more NLP on the patterning, but...
I've done LNP all the time.
But the patterning is there, and you obviously made progress on the patterning, which is a great thing. And, you know, it's a machine, so it's not fully gone from you. In terms of the other person, it throws you into judgmentality, because that's the matrix out of which it comes. And it throws you into weakness. It throws you into weak communications. You're not stating your statement. So if somebody's working for me, I'm going to say to them, try is not good enough for me. It's just not good enough. I know try means that if you're not willing to do it, if you're not 100% behind it, if you're not really committed to it, I've got to find another employee. And I'm sorry about that, but my need is to have this job done in an appropriate way and to have my company service its clients in a good way. And I'm not here to take care of you. I'm here to purchase your services for a job, pay you well for that job, and know that you're really committed to it. And so it's not acceptable to me. So the way you have to look at is your pattern is in taking care of other people.
The uncontrollable urge to strangle someone.
But why but that's important. Why do we want to strangle somebody? Right? Because
you tell them
no,
what
that's
you
not
want.
why.
You state what you want.
That's not why.
Why do you want to strangle them?
You want to strangle someone because you're out of your own power. And when you're out of your own power, you're angry. Just like the guy who had to salute the king and took it home and beat up the family, who beat up the family, who beat up your parents, who beat up you. Okay, in one way, either verbally or physically. So that's it. We all sit on that because we want to take our own power because we're scared of it. We're scared of giving offense. We're scared we're going to get hurt if we break the paradigm of codependence with other people, right? And learning how to language appropriately and say these things in a way that makes people step up, right?
Even if there's a language barrier of like someone speaking Spanish
Well,
or something
but
else.
again, when we finish the next classes, the next two classes, you'll have more languaging skills. And those language skills are applicable for somebody who wants to be empowered and wants to use them, right? You're hiding out. You don't want to take the responsibility for this. You don't want to be disliked. You know, it's up for you to look at it. Maybe you don't want to be disliked. You don't want to be seen as the bad person. You know, so you're sitting on it, but you're frustrated and you're leaking that. It's an energy form. You're angry and thinking, and you're leaking it, so you're punishing the person. And what you're doing is you're keeping this person in the jail of their own traumatized selves, their own weaknesses, and you're keeping them in prison. You're not acknowledging that they've got phenomenal power that needs to be tapped, and whatever their losses in life to force them to wake up to their own power, those are the losses they may have to take. but you are doing them a profound disservice and yourself a hugely profound disservice by not speaking truthfully and holding them to the standard you want them to be held to. With very clear, supportive, I like your work this way, you do this good work, this is completely not acceptable in terms of job performance from my point of view. And try is not what I want from my employees. I want you committed to doing this in a meaningful way. And so I don't hear that, and so I'm going to replace you.
I did that.
Okay.
I had to do that many, many times, and the first time I ever had to fire someone was very difficult.
Yes, and because it's difficult for you and because you have difficulties with this, and because you still have this pattern in you that's not healed of taking care of others and not being in your power and not being forthright, you are drawing in one candidate after another who's going to disappoint you. It's just going to happen.
I'm not now, but in the past, I definitely have done that, and right now
Right.
I'm not doing that.
Well, if you change your behavior, then you'll get better candidates to start with because you've changed your inner matrix. And that's just the proof of what I've been saying. You change your relationship to the way you're dealing with the world. You change your relationship, which means changing your relationship to how you are inside yourself. So you empowered yourself to talk to somebody in a different way. You've opened another whole energetic field within you. You've really literally changed your energetic field, measurable on a biofeedback machine. You've changed your energy field. Like energy likes energy. You're going to bring in people who will say, oh, I will do that. Yeah, I'll happily do that.
Like someone took a giant,
Rather than, oh, I'll try to do it.
someone took a giant paper cutter, and I took the people that said I'll try and the people that I will and I am, and the paper cutter just went right down the middle and cut them.
Cool.
And
Cool.
So those are the trying. And
Good.
Can't,
Okay.
and
So, you know,
do.
and so it's good to keep an eye on any other areas of your life where you're codepending with other people and taking care of other people and suppressing your own truth about the situation. Cool. Keeping other people in jail, keeping them down rather than helping liberate them with truth. Okay, so I'm sad I will brings us to, opens another door for us.
Jay now shows how power statements require us to use our own thoughts and feelings and not be guessing or maybeing how we present ourselves in the world.
So tell me what's powerful. I feel this, or I guess.
I feel.
Right? So, and which is more powerful? I think or maybe? Okay. So power statements begin owning your own thoughts and your own feelings and distinguishing between the two, right? So it's not, I guess this may happen or maybe, but you know, what you can say is, I haven't decided yet, I haven't chosen yet, I want to spend some more time with this. But when you have decided, you say, I think this about the situation, I feel this, and the feeling words are, as I will endlessly repeat, are feeling words. They're not situational words. They're not, I feel taken advantage of. It's that I feel angry and frustrated because I sense you taking advantage of me. It's really owning who you are. And if you want to be who you are, you have to own who you are. And you have thoughts and you have feelings. Some of those thoughts are based on actual good data. Some are not. Some of those thoughts are judgments you want to own, but at least you know you're owning them. And you're open to learning more. Your feelings are based on actual feelings you're having. And not to communicate them is to waste an opportunity to be in your power and to waste an opportunity for the other person to step into a reality, to adjust to a reality rather than to a stance. Remember, our stances meet, we play all this language and games with each other, and so our stances are doing this dance and our trauma cells are doing these dances with each other. That is not living. It's existing. It's just getting by with the mind going full time. How am I ever going to figure this out? Rather than saying, here I am, I show up, here's my thoughts, here's my feelings, educate me today in another way, open me up to new stuff, but this is where I stand now. And I'm open to the next level of, higher level of standing, etc.
Quick question to go back on what you said about feeling taken advantage of and feeling not being honored. When you have a friend and you've offered to do a favor for a friend this happened to me around Thanksgiving last year. I offered to help cook a turkey for a friend, and at the last minute, like 10 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving, I made the judgment call of saying something and giving information out, which caused everything to go crazy. It turned out okay for the person who was paying me, but for the friend that I was doing the favor for and cooking the turkey got ruined. The turkey was a $52 turkey. And so my agreement was to pay her back for the turkey. But she wanted me to go on and carry on to this whole thing of what she did wrong and how, and it went into a whole thing of where I didn't want to explain anything of what had happened. And now I feel like I want to send her an email, but I don't really want to confront her because I felt my energy was being sucked away from me. Do you have any answer to that? Because I just felt drained being around her, and the turkey thing was just the
Food?
the turkey that sunk the relationship.
Okay.
It buried us.
Okay. So what I get is that you had a pattern with this person, no doubt, and that in fact this was not the first time that something about how she handled it irritated you, and that, like as with your employees, you were taking care of her. So you had suppressed anger. So while trying to avoid her and dealing with her straight, you probably forgot about the turkey because it related to her and you wanted to avoid anything related to her.
I didn't forget about the turkey. What happened was my timer wasn't set correctly, and it was my fault with the turkey. But at the same time, I got sucked into someone else's drama about them having more people coming. And my first judgment was saying, go to Whole Foods, buy another turkey.
Okay.
Or go somewhere else and buy. My first judgment and my best judgment is always my first judgment. And when that comes up and I don't pay attention to it, then I get in trouble.
Right.
And knowing this person, I should have honored my first judgment.
So there's a lot of elements in this that are really helpful to all of us because they're so universal. One, most of us have intuitive judgments right off the bat, and most of us often ignore them. It's because we're so used to wanting to get along in the matrix and so unfamiliar with empowering our own knowingness. The minute we get a flash of our own knowingness, we rush by. It seems dangerous to us to honor because we'll lose an opportunity. There's always some fear level, or I'll get disapproved of in some way. So there's always some fear level going on. In terms of human communications, what I'm bringing out here is that, in fact, you use unempowered languaging with her because you're coming from an unempowered position. And one of the nice things about practicing empowered languaging is it forces you to come from an empowered position. The languaging will force you to look at where you're coming from and look at whether you're taking care of another person or you're simply owning your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own judgments, and communicating to the world from that place, right? Here I am, I show up with these thoughts, feelings, judgment, and I'm going to communicate to the world today and not fear the consequences of that, because the consequences are really going to be, you're going to be opened up to having to deal with me from a place of who I really am. And most likely you're going to shift to you dealing with where you really are. And the patterning you have of taking care of other people, whether it's the employees or her, will lead you to be discombobulated and make mistakes. You're not centered. The wrong temperature, the wrong thing, you're just not centered because your energy and your distraction, the minute you're in another person's game, your mind is going full time. You don't feel comfortable. How did I get here? Oh, I did something wrong again. But what am I going to do about it, et cetera, et cetera. You're in the human condition of the matrix we're trying to heal from. You're in that disempowered matrix where your idealized self looking to get saluted and your lack of training in communications and in knowing your own reality, experience and knowing and having a skill set that's not fight or flight to carry forward your own reality that you know, leads you to not even think, I better not step forward into my own reality, not even trust my own intuition, because if I go there, something come up anyway that I'm not familiar with. So the machine takes over. The machine's just running. It's running you. What's the message? When you have an intuition and a knowingness, especially in the early days of meeting somebody, trust it. You know, if it says, don't go there, there's nothing in there for me, that's going to be a loss. Trust it, right? Try to go to the no's. Say yes to your intuition, right? And no to your fear. Okay.
In this final segment, Jay finishes the review of power languaging, including the important use of the word and instead of but. He also sums up the nature of empowered communications, which is from the heart, truthful, direct, straight from me to you, versus weak communication, which is from the head and is fundamentally ducking and manipulative.
So moving on, we've got a few more key undermining words and phrases that we want to take a look at. A big one is the difference between and but. So which is the power word and which is the non-power word?
And is empowered.
Yes, and but is not. Because look what but does. You say something to me and I say but. I've immediately invalidated you, right? I've immediately diminished the value of what you're saying. If I do it even to myself, and I'm saying this, and then I'm saying this, but then I said this, I'm again invalidating even what I say, right? I'm taking a little piece off the validity of that. So in human communications, when somebody makes a statement and you come back with and, yeah, I hear that, and here's my thinking about it, right? And even I notice now when I'm writing, I find that every effort I make to get around the word but, I get more empowered sentences. Sometimes it just seems we're so used to it in the context. But also goes with the words however, though, although, etc. And those things also have the same effect. Rather than saying reality exists as a mindset over here and a mindset over here, and let's have some sense about what's real about these judgments, opinions, this data. When we're doing buts, and all those howevers, et cetera, we're just modifying and not showing up. It's a way that the matrix shows up in the most common everyday languaging. In subtle ways, is disempowering. So next, tell me which is empowered languaging. You make me feel really terrible when you do that behavior. Is that power languaging or disempowered languaging? Right, it's disempowered languaging. The power languaging, I feel really sad when you do that behavior. I feel. So power language goes right to your I statement about your feelings. Or you can go, if you want to make a statement about your thinking about it, you can say, I think this when you do that behavior. But more often it's feel. But you go to a feeling word. It's not I feel taken advantage of. It's I feel sad or I feel angry when you do that. Okay? Nobody makes you do something. People do trigger the buttons that are in you. So in healing and in the relationship work we've already talked about, owning your own reactiveness is extremely important. So the other person then has a choice, more of a choice, not to feel defensive or guilty, but to say, do I want to collaborate in your healing by not pushing that button of you? I know you've got that button, you haven't quite healed it yet. That's really what you're inviting the person to do when you say, I feel this when you do this. So the other person say, well, if that's my behavior triggers you there, I know it's your trigger. This is a conscious relationship, a conscious relatingness. I know it's your trigger. I got that. I won't trigger you there. And at the same time, I hope you're working on it, doing whatever you need to do to get that trigger out of your nervous system so you don't buy into it, so you don't feed it. But we do get triggered. We do have a neural net. We do have a machine that's been programmed and is reactive. And so to own that is to say, I feel when you do this, and have that human communication. Next, what's powerful? And this is another easy one. I want to do this. I just want to do this.
Oh, I want to do this. Power.
Right. I want to do this is power. Right. Again, it's clear, declarative statements about where you're coming from, unmodified. I just think you're a nice guy. I think you're a nice guy. Right? How much more power it has, how much more communication and expression and force it has. So in terms of empowering language then, the question of stating where you're coming from and using languaging that allows you to have equivocation built in, but it's not the equivocation that's of the although or but kind. Sometimes you're dealing with using just and but and however. It can get a little confusing because you're thinking that, oh, I've got to be extremely forceful and make a real strong statement in everything I say. However, you don't want to confuse the statement of what you know and where you're coming from when you leave out the word just, with being forceful about your judgments when you're clearly passing a judgment. So just as you don't say, you're a nasty person, rather than, I find your behavior to be uncomfortable for me or mean or whatever it is, you're not making this accusation, you're owning it, or I'm judging you to be, or my opinion is about this. Other words that you can use to stay away from are or is or was, if you're describing a situation, is it seems and it appears. So seems and appears is not evasive languaging when applied to judgment. You're not saying, you are this. You're saying, it seems to me this might be going on. It seems to me you might be in this place. It's the languaging of opinion and the recognition that you're just owning your own perceptions. So I just want to make sure there's no confusion about that kind of languaging. So in sum, what we've got is a body of information and languaging that allows you to own where you're coming from and be clear about where you're coming from rather than evade where you're coming from, right? So you think, you feel, you choose, you want to. You don't just want to, you want to do this. You express your feelings, you express your thoughts, and you own when something is judgmental. So on your sheet of paper at the bottom, on each side, we're going to have a summary of the nature of what the languaging represents. So on your power side, your empowerment languaging, notice we're always talking about direct expressions. They're straight from me to you. So write this down. At home, write it down. So you can focus on it and you can have this in front of you to look at. Direct expressions, they're straight from me to you. They're truthful. You own what you're saying. You own even your own judgments. They're sincere. They're authentic. They're clear. They're concise. And if you're not in the matrix, they're coming from your inner voice, your inner knowingness, ideally. They're not coming from your traumatized self. They're coming from your knowingness about what's truthful about a situation, at least your truth in the situation. And they're actually honoring of the other person. You're honoring the person's ability to hear it from their true self. You're expanding the capacity of the other person, the potential that the other person will hear from their true self. So what's weak languaging? The expressions are always sideways. They're coming out sideways. You're not really showing up fully. They're passive-aggressive. You try to sneak things in rather than own where you're coming from. You're much more likely to be dishonoring of the person, sort of sneakily trying to avoid saying something negative about them, but somehow managing to get that in, sneaking in that dishonoring. You're coming from your head, you're not coming from your heart. You're in a defensive position. You're very frequently rationalizing. Well, this happened because of this or this or this, rather than, yeah, I made a mistake, I didn't show up. And you get into stories. You get into endless stories. Many, many people get into endless stories about situations rather than cut to the chase. What's the chase? What was your behavior? What's the other person's behavior? Was it functional or was it dysfunctional? Did you come from a traumatized self and hide behind all this weak languaging, or did you come straightforwardly from your sense of reality, willing to own your own judgmentality? Okay?
You can always do a Byron Katie on it, too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can always do a Byron Katie on it, too. That's an advanced class, so we won't have on these tapes, just a reference to it. Okay, that's the teaching for this class. So now the last piece of homework for you is to go back to the drama you wrote about earlier in the class. Everybody take out that piece of paper in which you wrote the drama. And now I want you to write a scenario in which you incorporate what you've learned in this class, using the languaging and the mindset, and play out that scenario, at least your role in it. And if you can imagine how the other person might respond differently if you came from this place, write that in too. But at least at minimum, write out your new role in expressing yourself in this situation. And that'll be the end of this class. In the next class, we're going to start looking at the book Nonviolent Communications and that methodology to take communications to yet an even stronger level. This has been the basic course, the foundational course, and now we go on to Nonviolent Communications. See you next DVD, see you next audio tape.
If you are interested in an appointment with Jay, you can email him at jlevincoaching@gmail.com or contact him directly at jlevin.com. The following are testimonials from students who completed Jay Levin's course on Life Mastery Basics.
Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm a cameraman, and I am sitting here in front of you because on my first day coming in to film Jay, I was very surprised to be a part of what was happening. I was not expecting the shoot that I had walked in on. And after filming Jay for a day, I realized that what he was talking about had been something that I had maybe been searching for a long time, and was very surprised and felt very excited that what I had walked in on and became a part of was something that I would offer up to my family and friends and even my peers. I'm 28 years old, and the first thought that came to my mind was how my buddies could use this skill set to improve and better their own lives. So as I was thinking, standing behind the camera, I spoke up to Jay and felt, I was so excited about what he was talking about that he decided to put me in front to give a small testimonial, because I really felt it was necessary to let the audience know how important and groundbreaking these life skills are. Just sit back for a moment and think about your own life and your relationships. And I think what Jay is touching upon is very much the essence of community and family and friendship, and I would highly recommend it to anyone.
One of the things about this course is that it's called Basics of Life Mastery. And I think one of the things that course provides is giving practical tools that can be applied in real life situations so that we can move out of sort of the stance self, move out of the traumatized self, and really make deliberate progress and concrete progress. So I think the tools are one of the most important things, that we're actually learning skills, sets to work with another human being, to actually live and come from a very creative way and fun way of living in life. It's not like a chore. It really makes it more of this engaged way of being in the world. I think the course is extremely valuable no matter whether someone feels extremely skilled in this kind of work. I think there's always something to be learned, because the moment we think that we've mastered it, we stop learning, we stop growing, and there's always, I think, room to grow. I would say nonviolent communication and also the class on finances and relationships, those are probably the most valuable for me. And learning how to just be with a human being more on a really authentic, open, sharing level where it's very, very connected. No hiding, no gaming, really one person coming to another from the soul level.
Yes, I am feeling some shifts, more shifts of connection with people, family members. I've noticed myself be a bit more empathic than usual, than my usual stance. So I've done a little bit less of that in the last couple of days. I'm a bit more empathic, more communicating. And also I'm noticing a lot more natural bubbling of joy that's coming forward. Well, I found the course meaningful personally, first of all, in the explanation of how we as humans develop our trauma self and how we act from this trauma self. I found that I have a deeper understanding of how I'm acting and reacting, so I find that tremendously valuable. Another thing that's been clearer is how I am in relationships in terms of codependency, i.e., am I telling the truth and am I backing myself up and holding my own when I'm in relations with people? So that's coming up for heightened awareness. Another thing that's coming up from the course is the understanding that the frustration I was feeling in the past few months is me having a very profound need to express myself in many areas that I haven't been very internal.
The things that I've learned in this course that are already affecting my life are as follows. The value of the relationship, the value of the non-violent communication, honoring myself more and realizing that I don't have to commit a codependent dance with people, that just reaffirming things that I already knew and anchoring in, hopefully, at least the foundation for nonviolent communication, so I don't get into, aggressive arguments with people anymore. I'd like to do a couple of the courses again, a couple of the sessions again, like relationships and the nonviolent again, and also the self-nurturing. I'd like to do that. I would say whether you've done a lot of work on yourself or whether you've done almost no work on yourself, this is a good point to stop and take a look at how you relate to yourself, how you relate to others, how you walk through your day-to-day life, whether you go with blinders on or whether you have a full 360-degree view. I would say that this is a key mastery to starting that journey and continuing forward so you can be your full potential. I would say that that's a key point. And if you don't want to, no one's going to hold anything up to you and push you. You have to take the first step yourself.